All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really powerful, actionable blueprint from our source material on achieving personal greatness and honestly just overcoming that feeling of stagnation in your life. If you've ever felt stuck or like you're just kind of surviving day to day rather than actually thriving, you're going to find these concepts incredibly relevant. The material we're looking at breaks down the literal mechanics of what it takes to push past those invisible boundaries. The big takeaway right up front: true growth absolutely requires a fundamental shift in how we approach setbacks and effort.
Right off the bat, the source sets this incredibly gritty tone. It hits you with a hard truth. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It paints life as this incredibly challenging environment that will beat you to your knees and keep you there if you let it. And, the source doesn't try to sugarcoat the human experience at all. Instead, it suggests that the journey of a lifetime, the real pursuit of your ultimate greatness, begins right here in the face of that exact adversity. Recognizing this harsh baseline, that is step one in the blueprint.
So let's get right into section 1, the reality of your dream, or as it's framed, navigating the abyss. Look, changing your life, it's hard, really hard. The material points out that when you actually commit to a dream and start working toward it, you're practically guaranteeing yourself a healthy dose of disappointment, failure, and pain. It notes there are going to be moments of severe self-doubt. And because of this intense friction and honestly the paralyzing fear of both failure and success, the author observes that most people just stop trying. They settle into a comfortable routine, they stop stretching, and they often end up just complaining about their situation instead of taking the risks required to change it. Which brings us to section 2, the necessity of falling forward and how we actually reframe failure. Take a look at this number, 2,600. Reggie Jackson struck out 2,600 times in his career. That is the most in the entire history of baseball. Just imagine that. That's a lot of long, quiet walks back to the dugout with your head down. But as the source brilliantly points out, people don't dwell on his strikeouts, right? They only remember the home runs. This totally shatters the myth of flawless success. The argument here is simple. To succeed big, you cannot be afraid to fail big. You have to learn how to fall forward. Following that exact same logic, consider 1,000. Thomas Edison conducted 1,000 failed experiments before finally finding success. I mean, most of us would probably throw in the towel after, 3 or 4 attempts? But he kept going because that 1,001st experiment, that was the light bulb. The core takeaway here is that every single failed experiment is quite literally just one step closer to success. The underlying message is pretty clear. If you aren't experiencing failure, you probably aren't pushing the boundaries of what you're actually capable of achieving. There's this great old saying the text brings up that captures this perfectly. If you hang around the barbershop long enough, sooner or later, you're gonna get a haircut. The source shares this amazing anecdote about a young actor. Early in his career, he auditions for a Broadway musical. He couldn't sing, totally bombed the audition, and didn't get the job. But he prepared for the next one and the next one. 30 years later, he finally catches a break and performs in a hit play on Broadway. The beautiful irony here, and the main lesson, is that it was at the exact same theater where he failed at that first audition 3 decades prior. So the whole thing boils down to this famous 2-step formula for resilience. Step 1, take the hit. Step 2, keep moving forward. The underlying philosophy is that literally no one and nothing is going to hit as hard as life itself. Winning in this framework isn't about how forcefully you can deliver a blow, not at all. It's entirely about endurance. It's about how much adversity you can absorb while still maintaining your forward momentum. That raw capacity to just withstand pressure, that is presented as the true definition of how winning is done. All right, moving to section 3, ghosts of unfulfilled potential. This is all about the true cost of inaction. The source asks a really sobering question here to emphasize the ultimate cost of playing it safe. It asks you to vividly imagine a scenario where you're lying on your deathbed, and standing around your bed are ghosts. But in this thought experiment, they aren't just any ghosts. They're angry, they're disappointed, and they are visibly upset with you as the clock runs out. And what are those ghosts? They represent your unfulfilled potential. The text argues they're the ideas you never acted on and the talents you simply chose not to use. The framework imagines them looking down at you and saying, "We came to you because you could have brought us to life, and now we have to go to the grave together." Wow. It is a stark reminder from the author that settling for a life that is less than what you're capable of living carries a massive emotional toll, and it ultimately leaves you haunted by what could have been. Let's shift gears to Section 4, hard-earned skill over talent, diving into the mechanics of mastery. This part totally challenges that classic excuse we all hear, or make ourselves. It states that people who claim they're no good at math or writing are usually just confusing innate talent with forged skill. The reality presented is that people often struggle simply because they quit practicing the very minute they get tired. Talent is defined as what you have naturally, but skill, true, undeniable skill, is only developed by hours and hours of beating on your craft. The material insists, pretty strongly, that relying on talent alone is just a guaranteed path to mediocrity. And building that skill? Well, it requires continuous sacrifice. The blueprint says you have to be willing, at any given moment, to sacrifice who you currently are for who you will eventually become. In practical terms, the source explains this means investing heavily in your own mind. It recommends reading, spending time alone for actual self-discovery, and letting go of the urge to just copy others to get their approval. The argument is that you can never truly be the best version of yourself if you're constantly exhausting yourself trying to mimic someone else.
And that leads us to our final part, Section 5, just take the first step, the ultimate call to action. The biggest takeaway here? You have to fiercely invest in yourself. The material advises that if you want to achieve unprecedented success, you've got to break out of those safe little routines. The blueprint suggests stepping completely away from negative influences or people who drag you down. Instead, the author argues you must align yourself with people who are hungry, unstoppable, and honestly a little unreasonable in their pursuit of more out of life. Your environment and your circle, according to the text, heavily dictate your ability to actually execute on your dreams.
A huge part of this blueprint is learning to define your own value. The source suggests getting to a place where you literally stop worrying about being a people pleaser and instead embrace the fact that you might just be an uncommon breed. The text points out that when you start stepping into your true potential, you naturally separate yourself from the crowd. You just have to accept that not everybody is going to see your vision and not everybody is going to join you on the journey. And within this framework, that sense of isolation is framed as a perfectly normal, absolutely necessary part of the process. The source demands that when things get incredibly dark, because they will, whether you're facing rejection, financial loss, or just a total lack of support, you have to look your dream in the eye and declare it's not over until I win. The philosophy reminds us that pain is temporary. It might last a minute, an hour, or even a year, but it will eventually subside and be replaced by something else. Quitting, however, is presented as an absolute finality. If you surrender, that regret, that lasts forever. So the final piece of this whole framework is simple. Stop talking about your goals and physically take action. The author pushes back heavily against our tendency to blame circumstances or point fingers at other people for why we aren't where we want to be. Instead of looking for excuses, the blueprint urges you to fight your way back into the light, even if it means climbing out of a difficult situation just 1 inch at a time. The absolute necessity, according to the text, is to physically take that very first step today. The material leaves us with this incredible, provocative final thought. It argues that the world needs a lot of help right now, and it specifically requires your time, your unique talent, and your treasures. The source emphasizes that it really doesn't matter how much you currently have. What truly matters is what you choose to do with your specific individual gifts. Limits and fears are mostly categorized by the author as mere illusions. So looking at this entire blueprint, the ultimate question remains, what is your next move going to be?